Hello, and welcome to the Wheel of Time Rewind podcast. I am your host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined by my friend Michael Whifford.
Hello.
So we're back at you here with episode 3, and today we're going to be continuing on our dissection of where we are at the start of the series, introducing you to different characters that are in the two rivers at the start of the series here, so that way we can get you prepared to know what to expect for when the series launches in November. But before we do that, we have a little bit of some housekeeping to do here, with some news on the Wheel of Time Rewind front. So, as you know, we have a Twitter and an Instagram account for the podcast here, and that is at WOT Rewind. But now we also have an email address in case you don't want to get onto social media and save yourself some pain there. So our email address is wheeloftimerewind@gmail.com. And you can thank all these awesome tech upgrades and all these great connections to Mike here. He's running the editing, he's doing all the tech side of stuff. I'm doing the talking right now. So Mike, before we get into our episode here, why don't you tell us about what you shared with me the other day?
Obviously, there's a ton of really cool Wheel of Time content out there right now. Everyone's talking about it because the trailers have dropped and we're getting so close to the show. And on YouTube, I just stumbled across this Lego fan-made trailer for the Wheel of Time. And I sent it to Dylan, and it was so much fun just watching it. I mean, it wasn't like the most advanced thing ever, but it was such a fun watch.
No, like you said, it's definitely fan-made, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It was fully enjoyable. Like, you couldn't help but watch this Lego trailer for the Wheel of Time TV show and not laugh or smile. And so we highly encourage you to go out and give this trailer a watch. It was done on YouTube. The account is called Wheel Talk. And the person that runs it, their name is Brian, from my understanding from reading the comments and the description of the account. And you can find them on Instagram as well as Recappasedai. That's RECAPPASEDAI. So, moving on to the topic at hand today, we covered the boys and the girls of the two rivers in our last episode. And today we're going to talk about some of the other characters that we'll be seeing at the start of this series. So I think we should start this off right at the top with our main mistress of magic, Moraine. So Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about Moraine?
Okay, so Moraine is, as Dylan said, an Aes Sedai. And she is basically a witch, or, this world's magic users, like we've talked about before. And she is played by Rosamund Pike. And you might have seen her in some other films. I know she was in a 007 movie, Gone Girl, and a couple of other things. But she's a pretty familiar face. I was actually very surprised when I looked her up a little bit. And I was like, oh man, I've seen her so many places. But she's in the book. She's described as a very short. She's shorter. She's like 5'2" or so, and but she's always calm and has this very cool, like icy coolness to her, and I thought Rosamund did a really nice job of that. Just from the trailer.
Yeah, like Mike said, in the books, Moraine is described as being quite short, but she's always has, like, despite being a smaller person, always had like this air of authority around her and can, like, look at you and she's in control of the situation. She also, like Mike said, has that Aes Sedai calm that is stereotypical of all of the women that use the one power. They have a bit of a reputation that we'll get into in a later episode. But when you're talking about Moraine, she is coming in as an outsider of the two rivers. She's not from the area, and nobody at the start of the series in the Two Rivers knows that she is an Aes Sedai until she is revealed. And when she is in the Two Rivers there, you'll kind of like see her interacting with the rest of the cast that we've talked about so far, and just kind of getting integrated into that Two Rivers custom at the start of the series. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Moraine out of all the characters we're talking today on screen, because she is pretty sweet.
Yeah, she is really cool. And I don't know if you noticed this, but and this is to everyone listening too, is the actress, like in the trailer, you'll notice her face kind of has, it's almost like a smoothness to it, and it's because in the books, Aes Sedai are described of having this ageless look.
Right.
Like you couldn't identify how old they were. And so I thought that was a nice touch that they really did try to do something. It almost feels a little supernatural, but that's okay in my opinion.
Right, because it's meant to have like this supernatural beauty appearance to it. Because like in the books, although Moraine is much older than the other characters we've talked about so far, she is described as looking as young as Nynaeve. And Nynaeve is supposed to be like 18 to 20 or something like that in the books at the start of the series. And Moraine is definitely older than that. But I think that they did a nice job with that sort of Aes Sedai look as well. So moving on to our next character. If we talked about Moraine, we can't talk about Moraine without talking about Lan. So Mike, give us a lowdown on Lan.
Okay, so Lan Mandragoran. He's from the Borderlands, and so in the world we're talking about, in this Earth, because it is described as Earth in the first book at least, the top of the continent, it's a bridge, or there's a border between basically where civilization is and then where all the forces of the dark are, and the Borderlands are kind of like the wall between. If you've watched Game of Thrones, you could think about the wall where the Watch is, and that's kind of like what the Borderlands are. And you're going to see a lot of parallels between the Wheel of Time series and Game of Thrones series. Actually, both Robert Jordan and George R.R. Martin were very good friends, and they sort of like did nods to each other in their books. But Wheel of Time did come out before,
I was just going to say that, yeah.
before the Game of Thrones series. Now, as I was saying, Lan is from the Borderlands, so he's used to fighting Trollocs and some of these forces of evil, and he is Moraine's warder. And we're going to talk more about warders and like the process of becoming a warder and kind of their abilities and stuff, but Lan is a very seasoned fighter. He's very good with a blade, and he's bonded to Moraine through the use of the One Power or through their magic. And so he accompanies her wherever she goes.
Right, and we mentioned in, I think, episode 1 even, that a warder is pretty much like the bodyguard of the Aes Sedai. And so that's a good way to describe Lan. He's described as having like cat-like reflexes and being very fast and stealthy and sneaky throughout the series as well, just like demonstrating the ability to not just be proficient in battle, but being proficient in spying and keeping watch and everything. And he has this cloak that I'm actually quite interested to see how they do this in the series here. Because warders have what's called a warder's cloak, and this cloak is basically like almost an illusion, where the wearer of the cloak, wherever the cloak is kind of hanging down, it almost renders them invisible, but what it's really doing is kind of like shifting and mirroring what's around them. So think almost like in Harry Potter, the cloak of invisibility. That's kind of like what Lan has here, because it's mentioned several times in the first book, Eye of the World, that like Lan almost looks like a floating head on top of nothing, riding a horse sometimes. So I'm interested to see how that goes. We had mentioned previously that in the books, Lan is described as being a bit more muscle bound, despite being very quick, and like that's the contrast that it talks about with him, is like he's much faster than he looks. However, in the series here for Amazon, it's looking like Lan is much more slight, but still pretty solid. And so he is going to be played by the actor Daniel Henney, and I'm loving the look of him so far. I am very excited to see Lan out there with Moraine and the rest of the group here.
And this is actually a bit of a contentious topic for some in some of the Wheel of Time forums and Facebook groups and such that I've seen, is that they they don't necessarily agree with the look of Lan, but I say we wait until we see how it plays out on screen.
Exactly. I'm just excited still.
I did want to share one of my favorite... I did want to share one of my favorite quotes from Lan. And so this kind of sums up his character and sort of the Borderlands in general, their view on the world. And so this is: death is lighter than a feather, duty heavier than a mountain. And that's one that we kind of see throughout the book series continue to be brought up, and just kind of their mentality in the Borderlands that...
Well, when you're living on the edge of destruction and fighting for like your life every single day, you pretty much know you're going to die. It's just a matter of how you die, and did you do your duty, and did you protect everyone you could before you did meet your end. Now, the one thing I will say, like, about the Borderlands, when you compare them to the Wall, in Game of Thrones, living at the Wall and being part of the Night's Watch is a punishment, but it can be chosen as well. When you live in the Borderlands, that's just like your country. That's where you were born into. Like, you're not gonna be, like, as a punishment, sent to the Borderlands to fight in the Blight and die. But what you will be doing as a Borderlander is being that sentry, that first responder, basically, and keeping the rest of the continent safe, whether they know it and acknowledge it or not. So that's kind of where the parallels of the Wall and being a Borderlander differ a little bit. And the land beyond the Borderlands, why it's called the Borderlands, is because it borders the Blight, which is this land that's been corrupted by the Dark One, where all sorts of nastiness can be found. So moving on, we covered Moraine and Lan already, so let's go to the next person on our character sheet here. The Gleeman, Tom Merlin. Go ahead, Mike. What do we got for Mr. Merlin?
Like last week, it was all about the Edmonds Fielders, the people who were living there, and this episode's all about the Outlanders, the people who came visit. So Tom Merlin, he is a gleeman who has come to the Two Rivers to, well, you could say spread glee, I guess.
Perform.
But really, to perform. So gleemen in this universe really do a little bit of everything. They juggle, they play instruments, they tell stories. And that's one of the big things with Tom's character, and such a cool thing that you kind of get in the books, is that he does tell these different stories, and you get some more of the history of the world through them. He's an older man, very gnarled. He's got these thick white mustaches in the book. His hair is all white, and he's a very skilled gleeman.
Yes, he's a very skilled gleeman, and just to like expand on what Mike said farther, they're kind of like a one-man show where they play instruments and sing like a bard. They will tumble and juggle and do acrobatics like a circus performer. They will tell stories and, like Mike said, kind of give you more of a history of the world, or like retell famous adventures that may have happened and everything. Now, the one thing I want to talk about with Tom is you mentioned his age. And the actor that they have playing Tom Merlin is Alexandre Willemay. Oh man, now you got me butchering names. So anyways, okay. The actor they have playing Tom is quite a bit younger than what I was expecting when I was picturing him. What about you, Mike?
Yeah. I was picturing like Tom Selleck or that actor. I forget his name, but he's like white hair and he's like kind of that usually that cowboy, and he has like the big thick mustache.
I know exactly who you're talking about. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was like, that's who I pictured a lot when I thought about this.
Yeah, the actor they have playing Tom actually seems much younger than what he's described as in the books. Like, he's still gonna be, I think, looking like he's in his 40s or so, or maybe even early 50s, but he does not have like that grandfatherly look that like Tom is described as, at least from his headshots on the internet.
Yeah.
And like Mike mentioned, the mustache that Tom Maryland has, that's a big part of his character in the books. He's always playing with his mustaches. He's always stroking his mustaches. And like, he's very expressive in the book with his hair, like his facial hair and his eyebrows and mustache. And so I'm just really interested to see like how this goes for Tom on screen here. Now, talking about Gleeman as well, we mentioned how warders have a special cloak. Gleeman also have a special cloak. It's kind of like a cloak of many colors, where it's like a patchwork quilt-looking type of thing is how I always pictured it, where it's all different colors and patterns of the rainbow, and very nonsensical. And like Gleeman, I always kind of pictured them almost as like being so bright and outrageous that you have to stare at them because of how they look.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of their whole MO. Those cloaks usually have like bags sewn in to carry some of their stuff. They usually have big pockets where they hide, the balls and some of the other things that they travel with. And they make their living by performing. So by wearing these things, it sort of tells everyone else, oh, it's a Gleeman. And if he goes into like an inn or something, everyone knows that, oh, this inn has a Gleeman. So it's kind of, that advertisement. I did want to add on, Dylan, that I think the reason they went with a younger actor is for possibly a more fleshed out love story.
I would say that, and also what I'm thinking as well is just the length of this series and what the potential of this series could be. Whereas, like, Tom is described as being more aged in the books. If they got an older actor to play Tom, with how many years I'm picturing this series being on the air for, I think that it could easily be on the air for at least like 8 to 10 seasons. You could always risk having an actor pass away in the middle of the series and having to recast or just cut that character out. But I think you're right. I think a love story is probably in the cards for our friend Tom here. Moving on to the next character that we're going to talk about today with our trend of Emond's Field outsiders. We have the peddler Podden Fane. So, Mike, why don't you talk about Podden Fane and peddlers in general here?
Okay, so peddlers, especially for the Two Rivers, are very important because they bring outside materials and allow people to buy things that they can't really make, since the Two Rivers is such a small, like, different farming communities. Things like buttons, different types of cloth, books, that's a big one. And the big thing, like, peddlers bring in is information. Since these areas are so secluded from the rest of the world, when they come, they always bring information. And so you have to imagine, like, the Two Rivers area, Emond's Field, is so secluded that they're only getting outside information like once a year, twice a year. Now, Podden Fane is, like just talked about, a peddler, and he has come to the Two Rivers year after year for quite some time. He's described as being very pale, skinny, not a very attractive man, I'd say.
I feel bad now.
I know, but, gotta be honest with you guys. Anyway, but when he comes to the Two Rivers, he's full of self-importance because he has all this information. He loves the attention, and he just happens to be there. He's another Outlander, even though they recognize him pretty well, who happens to show up during this Belltime event.
Right, and like Mike mentioned, that he's kind of like very self-important because he is like the source of news and information for the people within the Two Rivers and Emond's Field, because there's no people that regularly come to the Two Rivers area other than peddlers. Like in the books, when they mentioned that Tom was going to be there, the Gleeman, it's this huge ordeal because Gleemen haven't come to the Two Rivers in forever. And then similarly, when Pod and Fane is coming for this Beltane festival, the rumor is that he's going to be bringing fireworks with him, which haven't been seen in the Two Rivers for a decade or more. So again, like picture this very isolated area, and Pod and Fane, and being a peddler coming in, everybody wants his stories, his news, his goods. Like everyone in the town, when Pod and Fane rolls in, comes pouring in and wanting to buy things from him. And so that kind of gives him that air of self-importance. Now, Mike said he is like described as being a very thin, very unattractive, weaselly man. And I am very sorry, but Johann Myers, the guy they have playing Pod and Fane, I saw him and I was like, that is a great actor choice for Pod and Fane. Really nothing is. Against Mr. Myers and his looks. I'm sure he's a lovely man. But he has a great look for what you would picture for Pod and Fane. The one thing like I would mention is like with all of these casting choices that we are seeing for the Wheel of Time series here, what I have seen from the showrunners and like the directors is that while they would like to get actors and actresses who resemble these characters as they're perfectly described in the books, the reality is that you're never going to find like perfect actresses for every single role. And so what they focused more on was finding actors and actresses that they felt embodied the spirit, embodied the personality of these different characters we're seeing here. Now, Pod and Fane, the Johann Myers, the actor they have playing him, I think that he looks quite good for his role. So I am excited to see him, excited for this series in general, and definitely looking forward to getting this on my screen the same night that it launches.
Probably gonna have to watch it a couple of times to take notes on the other times.
Well, yeah, I'll watch it the first time, just enjoy everything, and then rewind it, play it again, and then maybe take some notes.
Oh, I like what you did there.
All right, Mike, so before we get on out of here, let's talk about where we are in the series here, because I think we had mentioned previously that both of us were going to be rereading this series to get prepped, get everything fresh in our minds for the launch of the Amazon series in November. So we still have over a month until that series comes out, but where are you at in the series right now?
Okay, so I've been doing, after some advice from you, I've been doing a reread of the first book. I've been going between listening with my headphones on Audible, which has helped so much with pronunciation, and reading the first book that I have. So like at night when I'm in bed, I'll just pick up where I left off in the audiobook and then read, and I try to finish at a chapter and then pick up on the audiobook at that chapter the next day. Right now, I'm actually towards the last quarter of a book or so. Matt and Rand just got to Camelin.
Not going to be spoiling too much here, Mike.
No. I'm just saying, like, they got to a city.
Okay, got to a city,
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
What about you? I know you've been rereading the series.
Yeah, so like Mike mentioned, Audible and audiobooks in general are the way to go. For me, at least, for this series. And that's how I read it my first time around, and I'm just, like, powering through right now. Because, like, I crunched out the first book, Eye of the World, within, like, a week and a half.
Crazy.
So
crazy.
I got that all done. So I am all read up on the book one Eye of the World. But then I had the discussion with you, Mike, about where to go next. Should I go on to book 2 for The Great Hunt? Should I go on and do the prequel book, New Spring? And what I ended up deciding on doing is going with the prequel book and New Spring. And my rationale for doing that was that although it doesn't really matter what order I read the books in, I think prepping for the Amazon series here, reading that prequel book is a good next step because of what will probably be covered in the first season of the show here, where I'm kind of anticipating maybe a little flashback sequence in season 1 here of some events that may have happened in New Spring. However, they may wait to do like a flashback sequence, if they ever do it at all, until a later season. Because they are only having 8 episodes in season 1 here. And so that really got me thinking about like where they're gonna go with season 1 here and what events they're going to stop at within the Eye of the World, because the rumor is that they're going to include some events from season 2 and 3 as well, which I am quite interested to see what they do, and I have some good guesses as to what they're doing based on the trailer for season 1.
Well, some interesting things that I've read recently, as I've been going through and compiling a lot of different information, taking it all in, is that Robert Jordan, the first 3 books, he wrote each one to be like the last book in the series, because he wasn't sure like if it was going to be popular, like, you know, he didn't know if he was going to end up continuing on with the series after that, and so he wrote the first book, and it sort of had like a very final type ending, even though there was still room for more, but like it could have been an ending, and the same thing with the second and third, and so I'm interested to see if that's kind of the approach they take, and they sort of stay within those first 3 books for these 3 seasons, I guess.
That would be kind of smart because they have already committed to 3 seasons of this show. But again, we are Wheel of Time fans, so we're hopeful that they'll have a more full interpretation of the series onto the screen here and have it be around for a decade or more. However, the reality is that there is a greater chance than not that will not happen, just based on so many different factors. But I am definitely excited about it still, and I am still bristling with anticipation for November to get here for the series to actually kick off and start. And you and I, Mike, are going to have a very busy couple of days after those first 3 episodes drop, because we are going to be watching and rewatching and watching and rewatching again all of those episodes and having to jump on here and get these out to everybody. But I am very excited to do that.
Me too. All right. I think that's kind of our episode on Outlanders, and we had our kind of a nice check in there with our book reading. So if anyone wants to reach out to us, they can find us on Twitter and Instagram at WOT Rewind. And you can always send an email. Questions, comments, feedback, anything would be welcome. And that's wheeloftimerewind@gmail.com.
All right. So with that said, we hope to see you guys next time, and we'll see you at the next turning of the wheel. Goodbye.
Bye.